Hey everyone, welcome back to episode number 12 of Co-Courtside. Today I have the pleasure of being here with current studio host and sideline reporter for TNT and NBA TV, Jared Greenberg. How you doing today, Jared?
Doing great, Alex. This is pretty awesome to get to chat with you.
No, well, I'll just jump right into it. Obviously this time of year for the fan, it's a very fun and exciting time, but for you, I imagine these past couple of weeks must have been very hectic and busy going from city to city. How have these past couple of weeks been for you?
First of all, it's awesome, right? Like I hope people recognize that as much as we're working in it, I'm a fan, right? And I love it. It doesn't necessarily feel like work. I'm not trying to say that it's not easy being away from your family
Mhm.
and being on the road so much, but I love every second of it. So I just did a stretch of 7 games over 15 days and being away 15 consecutive days and some of the best games so far,
Mhm.
the playoffs. It's been awesome.
Right.
Jumping around from coast to coast. I've been everywhere from LA to Milwaukee to New York to Phoenix um, to Oklahoma City and everywhere in between. So it's been really cool so far, and we still got a few more weeks to go.
Yeah, I know. It feels like the playoffs are never ending. It goes all the way to June.
Yeah.
So, and how does that work in terms of scheduling? Is it kind of like a week to week thing where, oh, this week you'll be in Oklahoma City, next week you'll be in New York? How does that kind of go for you?
So it's really interesting. It's fascinating. The way it works at TNT is that the play-by-play announcer, the color analyst, and the sideline reporter, which I am,
Mhm.
uh, are are teamed up. And so for the first round of the playoffs, TNT has 6 different teams of play-by-play, color analyst, and sideline reporter. And we get our first couple of games right when the schedule comes out a few days before the playoffs start. And
Right.
then as you're on the road, you just keep on finding out where you're going next. And so it's just like a crazy game of trying to figure out where you're going. And our bosses are obviously telling us where we're going. So like my first my first couple of days, I knew that I was starting in New Orleans and then I was going to Milwaukee. But then I didn't find out until afterwards that I'd be going to LA. And then once I
Oh
was in
my
LA,
God.
I found out we were going to Phoenix. And then
Right.
once I was in Phoenix, I found out that my next game was in New York. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
I'm sure the bosses have rhymes and reasons why we end up in certain places, but uh, it's pretty wild.
Where are you this weekend?
So right now I'm home because
Okay.
ESPN has Thursday night, Friday
Got
night,
it.
and Saturday.
Got
So
it.
my next game is Monday in Dallas. So currently, for the second round, it's a little different than the first round. It goes down to 4 different TNT broadcast
Right.
crews. So my crew, which is Iron Eagle, Grant Hill, and myself, we're assigned to the Oklahoma City Dallas series. So
Mhm.
we had game one of that series. We did game one in Oklahoma City, and then we'll do game four in Dallas on Monday, and then we'll do game five of that series in Oklahoma City, which we now know will happen because Dallas even the series last night.
Yeah. No, that one's gonna go down to the wire. I'm excited for that one. And kind of my next question is, uh, when and how, like, I've something that I always found curious, like, when do you find out who you're going to be talking to in between those quarters? Is it like based on who's up, who's down, who's playing well? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's 2 different ways that we do it right now. Um, the standard way, which is the way we've done it for most of the time, is when we interview head coaches, it's always the visiting head coach is at the end of the first quarter,
Right.
and the home head coach is at the end of the third quarter. And now, as you've seen, we've added in some of the games, we do a player. And the way it usually works is um, now the way it works is at the end of the first quarter, you do a player from the visiting team. And at the end of the third quarter, you do a player from the
Mhm.
home team. And the NBA just decides before each game whether we're going to do players or coaches. And then we huddle up with the PR staffs from each team and decide which player, if it is a player, which player we're going to do. And we just have this text chain going throughout the first quarter, and then in the third quarter
Wow.
for the home team, and we pick which player.
Right. So this is kind of the same thing of like what type of questions you're asking, right? Because obviously there's storylines and a lot of momentum, based on
Yep.
if Dallas is rebounding well, like, oh, how are you going to
Yep.
stop, OKC from rebound, just kind of that type of thing. So it's kind of like right before the quarter starts, you guys are bringing around what questions you can ask and how you,
Yeah.
answer
I mean,
that. Wow.
that's why, Alex, it's a really cool balance that I think you have to find of making sure you prepare for the game, understand what the big
Yeah.
storylines are coming into the game, following those storylines, but then watching the game
Right.
and listening
Right.
to the broadcast, and adapting to what those storylines are, right? Um, and so it's having a feel for the game, right? You can't
Yeah.
script your questions ahead of time.
Exactly. And how much do you enjoy doing that? Like just
Yeah.
spur of the moment type of thing, right? Because that's
Oh,
that's unheard of in terms of any other type of interviewing, really, in a way.
I love it. I absolutely, that's to me where
Yeah.
I thrive. It's like I said, having that feel for what does the viewer want to know? What does the
Yeah.
viewer at home care about? And does that relate to this person that I'm asking the question? How can I get the most out of that person to give the viewer either some sort of knowledge, some sort of entertainment, something that's going to make that viewer want to continue to watch.
Right. And this is gonna be kind of one of my later questions, but you were kind of covering it a little bit here. And the NBA, there really is no off season. Like it's kind of a
Yeah.
nonstop thing, and there's always headlines, there's always stories you have to follow. And I mean, to have you guys type of job, to have your job, you really have to love what you do and have a passion for it. I mean, that must go a long way, right?
You have to. And if you don't, you're
Yeah.
going to get sniffed out and people are going to see that you're a fraud. I could not imagine doing this
Yeah.
job without loving the NBA. And because not only does it resonate with the viewer, not only can they tell while you're on the air if you're excited about what you're doing, but it also helps you with the amount of preparation you're doing, with the amount of homework that I have to do
Yeah.
going into each broadcast that I do. I couldn't imagine if you don't love what you do, how could you possibly
Yeah.
pour the amount of
Yeah.
time and effort it takes to go into it if you didn't love it?
Right. Right. And yeah, people on Twitter will be right there to catch you on it. Everybody sees
No
everything
question.
nowadays.
Absolutely. Yep.
Um, my last question about the sideline reporting. Obviously some coaches and players, have more of the reputation of being the hard ass, you could say, or being more
Yep.
bitter to answering questions. How much of that do you factor into being like ask them the right questions? And also, like you said, these guys are playing in the playoffs in between quarters, you're asking questions. Is it like, you know, important to ask those quick and efficient questions because,
Oh
they're
yeah.
playing, in the NBA playoffs?
Yeah. I absolutely. You have to know who your subject is, right? Like they
Right.
talk about KYP in sports, know your personnel,
Yeah.
know the person you're interviewing. There are some guys that hate answering questions about themselves. And that doesn't mean you don't ever ask them questions about themselves, but you pick and choose your moments. And sometimes guys like to talk about their teammates first. So you ask a teammate, you ask them about their teammates first to kind of,
Yeah.
butter them up, if you will. There are some guys that like light questions. They want to talk about fashion or sneakers. And I'm not saying you necessarily do that in the in-game interview,
Right.
but it's knowing who you're talking with that's really important. It's part of your preparation. And the in-game interviews are certainly different than the post-game interviews that I do, right? Where you can be a little more wide-ranging, you have a little more time. But I agree with you about being concise with your questions. I think sometimes there's a need for context to help you set up your question.
Mhm.
But I think for the most part, ask your question. Make sure there's a who, why, where, or how in your question,
Mhm.
and that helps draw out the most from the person you're interviewing.
Was this newly implemented like this year where the players were being interviewed in between quarters? Because obviously you have the halftime and after the game, but I don't remember players being interviewed in between quarters. If I could be wrong,
Yeah,
but
it may have been sprinkled in last year, but
okay,
it really started this year with the in-season tournament. We wanted
okay,
to make the in-season tournament games feel different and unique, and we wanted the viewer to recognize that something different was happening. So for the in-season tournament games, we started interviewing players which I thought was a and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's just like with the
Yeah,
coaches. Sometimes some coaches are into it, sometimes they're
yeah,
not. So I think it's a cool thing that the NBA is always willing to try new things to bring the viewer inside the game.
right. Who's a coach that's always interested in the questions and gives you concise answers? Is there one specific one or a couple?
Concise answers. I'm trying to think. The coach that gives me the best answers, I wouldn't say
Best answers.
concise, but
Yeah.
the coach that gives me the best answers is Michael Malone.
Okay.
The Denver head
Interesting.
coach. He is some sort of genius where he can look at a box score for a second and memorize every note that's on there. Points in the paint, points off turnovers, second chance points, offensive rebounds, how many turnovers each
Wow.
player has.
Yeah.
You ask him one question and he will give you the best answer he has. But he's not concise. I'll tell you that. But I love it. It gives you. I
Yeah.
think that's the essence of what we're looking for, being really taken inside the huddle,
Mhm.
trying to understand what's going on and trying to get more than just generic cliche answers.
Right. Right. And obviously, we're talking a lot about you being a sideline reporter, but you also have experience as a studio host at
Mhm.
NBA TV and TNT. How does your mindset change your preparation for, the studio reporting and a sideline reporter to a studio host? My fault.
Yeah, it's another great question. I think the biggest difference is when you're a sideline reporter, you're locked into one game, two teams, the storylines that what's at stake in that game. For me, when I'm in the studio, particularly when I host Crunch Time, which is our whip around show where we catch the big moments from all the games, I have to be prepared for as many games that are being played that night. So if there's 12 games, I've got to be ready, for
Yeah.
24 teams.
Yeah.
So that's where it's different. It takes not that it takes more time or less time because I'm pouring a lot of hours into just two teams, but it's different type of preparation. When I'm a studio host, I got to know what the storylines are, what the top headlines are for each game for each
Yeah.
team, what the injuries are, what the streaks are, what the latest milestones are, what the history is between those two teams that are playing. So it's a different type of preparation that I
Mhm.
do. Uh, but I got to be honest, like Alex, that's the type of stuff I love the most is preparing, um,
Right.
diving into the nitty gritty and finding some nuggets that can help enhance the broadcast is stuff that I love. And it's being prepared. Like I don't use the overwhelming majority of the stuff that I prepare for in a
Okay.
broadcast, but
That's interesting. Yeah. Right.
knowing that I'm ready for any situation that pops up is what I really pride myself on.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask you how much of it is kind of like free flowing when you're, calling the highlights, in the background of the game, and how much of it is a script? You kind of just go back and forth.
Yeah, I would say none of it's a script,
Wow.
because we're covering live sports. So again, you have to go in with a plan and be ready to rip it up. You have to know what the main storylines are and apply them to what's happening in real time. But sometimes none of it plays out that way.
Right. How how fun is it and just awesome is it? Because obviously you've done Shaq in a Fool of Shaq and Dennis Scott, those
Yeah,
guys. You said you're on the same team as Ian Eagle and Grant Hill. Like these
yeah.
guys are legends at their job and what they do. Um, like obviously you've been doing this for a while now, but is it just like do you like have to pinch yourself sometimes like when you first started out, like wow, I'm really doing
Yeah.
it with these guys?
Yeah, a little bit. I think the coolest thing about TNT and being at Turner Sports is like just how real and humble everybody is. We don't have divas, high maintenance people at our
Yeah,
place. So everybody just makes you feel like part of the team. And that's the coolest part about working with athletes is, what they miss the most in their retirement life is having those teammates and they really bring you in and treat you like that.
yeah. Um, and I think what's cool when I did some research on your background and experience and stuff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd say for your job, there's really not one defining part. You've been a broadcaster, host, sideline reporter, play-by-play, and
Yeah.
I think it stems from your past experience. It says you were a radio statistician and talk show host for the New York Giants,
Yeah.
sports anchor for News 12, radio host for Sirius XM. Was that always kind of your motivation? Like, I know I want to get into sports, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to achieve
Uh,
that.
Bingo. Exactly. Hit the nail on the head. And this is massive advice that I give to anybody I speak to is, you can identify what your end goal is, but you have to create different roads and
Right.
paths to get there. And you have to be open, particularly in today's day and age, which is so different than prior generations where you can't just say, I'm going to do radio and just stick to that. You
Yeah,
have to be
yeah,
open and ready and be more
right.
flexible, and be willing to try new things. And yeah, like I worked a lot of jobs for free when I was younger. I worked a lot of jobs for just a couple of bucks, maybe to cover gas. But be willing to, meet as many people, network with as many people, and get as much experience, practical experience doing things as you can.
Right. And you went to Hofstra University. Was it at those years at university where you figured out you wanted to be involved with sports, or was that way before you always wanted to be involved in sports?
Yeah, so it was when I was 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and I got the opportunity as a high school student to work at a local college radio station. And first day I stepped in the radio station, um, I looked at my father who had to drive me there because I was 14 and didn't have a driver's license.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm never doing anything ever again.
Wow.
This is it. This is my career. And it got me focused in on school. And that's why I picked Hofstra, because of their communications program and the radio station they had there and the athletic department they had there. And I've just followed the path ever since.
I'm a communication student, so that makes me feel a little bit good that
Yeah.
that it's a good major to pick. Were there any specific uh like people you modeled your craft after or influences you had in this work in this job that you had?
Yeah, a lot of people. I studied a lot of different people, but the one that's had the biggest influence on me, which is now like a full circle moment, is Iron Eagle. I
Hmm.
started going to Nets games when I was, 10, 11 years old. At 14 years old, I met Ian, and it was like a movie sequence where I tapped him on the shoulder one day and said, I'm going to be doing this one day. And he is the most welcoming human being on the face of the earth, nicest guy. And he, was always open to chatting with me on the phone, over email. And now, 25 years later, we're working together,
Wow.
and it's pretty freaking cool that we're on
Yeah,
TNT broadcast together now after all those years ago that I
that's
really
cool.
watched him and studied him and said, I want to do this.
Is there obviously you've accomplished a lot in your career so far. Is there anything else that you want to set out to or any other goals that you have?
I think the goal right now is to keep my job. You know,
Good
there,
answer.
there's a lot changing in the landscape of television.
Right.
And I think we all just, it's people don't, I think, realize one of the parts about this, good, bad, or indifferent, is the insecurity, right? Like this job, while we cover wins and losses every night, we never know whether we are winning or losing.
Yeah.
And it's you could be a bit insecure at times because you don't know how you're doing. You could be riding the highest of highs, doing the biggest games, and then the next day they could tell you you don't have a job anymore. So it's just really making sure that you mind your P's and Q's, treat people the right way, be nice to people, and do your job at the highest level you possibly can for the right reasons at all times.
Mhm. Um, this kind of ties into my next question here is like the advice you have for aspiring kids that just wanted to get into sports in general and yeah, just some advice you have for them.
I go back to what you asked earlier. Number one, if you're passionate about it, if you love it, then follow your dreams. Study the craft. Look at people that you think you'd want to do that job one day and learn how they got to where they are. Network, talk to those people. Be nice to people, obviously, a huge part of it. And don't ever do it for any sort of celebrity or fame or because it's a cool job. Do it because you love it. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, like I said, you're going to be sniffed out not only by the people that are looking to hire you, but by the people who are consuming your content.
Right. Well, that's all I got for today, Jared. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have a very busy schedule, and I'm glad we
Uh,
were able to make this work. So
Alex,
really
this is
appreciate it.
awesome. I love talking about this industry. I love talking about it to
Yeah,
anybody who's aspiring. And like I said, Iron Eagle was so welcoming to me all those years ago. So I owe it to the next generation to help out however I can. So please reach out anytime.
I really appreciate that. It was great to finally meet you and talk to you. So I'd love to keep in touch. But
Yeah, absolutely, man. Anytime, reach
uh,
out, and safe travels to you, man. That's pretty
yeah,
awesome.
appreciate it. Appreciate it. I'm just trying to enjoy it as much as I can. I got a couple weeks left here in Madrid, so